Extremism is simply when one gets away from oneself, when you lose yourself. It's almost a cult-like state that somebody goes into and says, now I don't know who I am.
He is very loving. He's an amazing big brother. He is an amazing son.
He's sweet, he's loving, he's kind, he's generous.
Hard worker, give you the shirt off his back.
He's naive, like his mama.
Conflicted, anxious, sad, introspective at this time.
Unique, he's different.
Very introverted, soft, authentic, needy.
He will take a wrong and try to make it right.
I'm really not some violent, extreme individual that wants to see the government burned to the ground. I went along with this against my better judgment. There were plenty of red flags to show me what was going on was wrong. There were plenty of gut feelings that I didn't listen to, and I don't know why. So now it's just nothing but shame, not just because of what I have to go through, but what everybody else has to go through.
When I went into my first interview with Ty, I didn't know a lot about him. I knew about the case. Obviously, I'd seen it on the news. I'd read some discovery before I met with him, but I didn't know about him as a person. I was expecting to see a kid that had problems starting in elementary school. I was expecting to see lots of documentation of teachers' concerns, behavior problems, suspensions, expulsions. I was expecting to see a criminal history. I was expecting to see a psychiatric history. And what struck me is that I really didn't see any of that.
A lot of times what happens is that a child grows up and we're not, it's not one size fits all, but there is usually a rejection from a father-like figure. And that rejection sometimes is separation, divorce, sometimes the absence of, but sometimes it looks like somebody saying that somebody's not man enough, saying man up or man up, and this sort of like toxic manhood.
When he was 2 years old, his biological father was outside throwing football around, and I was in our sliding glass door, and he threw that football so hard to where another adult having the football thrown that hard at you would hurt you. And it knocked the little baby over, and I ran out there and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, he needs to know how to be a man. I'm like, he's 2.
My birth father to myself was extremely abusive. Physical abuse, verbal abuse, everything. And on top of that, I had to witness the same thing with my mom and 2 sisters. I remember times where he's picked me up off the ground either by my shirt or by my neck where my feet were dangling. He's closed fist hit me before, thrown me into walls, thrown me into the entertainment center.
He drank a lot. He was like 140 pounds. I swear that man could put away like 8 40-ounces.
He'd come home so drunk that the car would be in the front lawn, and he'd urinate himself.
Well, he wouldn't have clothes on and would be passed out in the chair.
Anything under the sun would have been cause for him to kind of lose his mind and go off on us.
When Ty was 11 and I went in there and said that I was divorcing his father, and he looked at me with that cute little face and said, what took you so long?
When I bought him this house, he helped me tear it apart. And one day he was sitting there on the steps, and I was doing something on one of these walls, and I asked him what was wrong. He was crying, and he told me that he wanted to know who was going to take care of him and his sister and his mother, and I just looked at him and I told him, you just worry about being a kid and let me worry about that. As long as I was around, he had nothing to worry about.
Ty has an untreated mental health issues, primarily a long-standing anxiety disorder. This started when he was very young. Unfortunately, it's not something he really felt comfortable sharing with his family or getting help for. His father was very, very clear with him on what it meant to be a man, and at a very young age started to instill this in him, which meant you don't feel sadness, you don't feel fear, you don't feel nervousness, you don't feel restlessness. So these things became ingrained in him in a very impressionable time in his life. And so, unfortunately, what his father did was instill just the opposite in him. There was a pervasive sense of fear and anxiety that he lived with.
His school life was very hard. It was very trying.
When Ty was younger, he always wanted to fit in.
Ty struggled. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't focus. It was like his brain was going more than what his body was.
As Ty tells the story, everyone knows him for his bloody, chewed up fingernails. That was, I think, how he dealt with his anxiety when he was young and became a habit that continued with him into adulthood.
The underlying issue that the person is dealing with, whether it's trauma or or stress, anxiety, depression. Sometimes people have a diagnosis such as being on the spectrum. This vulnerability is very put them in a situation where they can be easily groomed and recruited into extremism.
Ty likes to do things with his hands. Ty could take something apart, put it back together, have parts left over, but the thing worked better than when before he took it apart.
He had teachers that worked with him. They knew what kind of child he was. And the day he graduated and walked across that stage was the most amazing day because he did it. He, went on to MIAT and graduated with honors.
It's Michigan Institute of Aeronautical Technology.
When he graduated from MIAT, he was going into his 21st birthday.
After taking all my exams, I then got my license to work on aircraft. The first group of planes I was working on were just small commuter jets.
He was with Pentastar Aviation when he was arrested, October of 2020.
When I was working for Pentastar, we had 4 jets that we managed. All 4 were used for flying General Motors executives through the country and throughout the world.
It was exciting in the sense that he got to fix airplanes, and take other people's lives in his hands. And the killer with all of this is he was afraid to fly.
The way he approached his life was really this active avoidance of helplessness. He told me he never wants to be the passenger in the car, always a driver. Despite being an airplane mechanic and sort of loving airplanes, he didn't like to fly because he couldn't fathom placing, his life in somebody else's hands.
I started fishing at a really, really, really young age. I think I was 2 or 3 the first time I caught a fish. So I think I was catching fish before I learned how to ride a bike.
It was something that relaxed him, and it was never something that brought him any form of stress.
The competition, the camaraderie of it.
We haven't done much of it the past couple of years because I've been traveling for the military. I miss it, I do, because it was a good time for us to just go out. We just sit and put our poles in the water and
But our goal, yeah, that's it. You would talk. It's like you're in a whole different world when you go fishing.
I fish for walleye in the spring, perch in the spring and fall, bluegill, crappie, largemouth and smallmouth bass from the spring into the summer, catfish in the summer, carp in the summer. By the time fall usually rolls around, I'm getting ready to start hunting season anyway. One of the other dreams and goals I had stemmed from when I was younger. And when I was younger, I always wanted to have like a sporting goods store, bait and tackle shop, on a lake or something like that.
Extremist group, it doesn't happen with burning crosses or being awful situation. It starts with a barbecue. It started by having fun. It started by reading the Bible in some situation. And so it becomes like a really friendly community. And soon enough, you belong to this group. And whether you like it or not, it's too good to be in this group that makes you feel good about yourself.
You've got a group of people that are supporting you. They're helping you soothe your anxieties in some ways. They're making you feel important.
Some of the other connections were more genuine connections where someone liked fishing or someone liked hunting.
It just got out of control and his anxiety became so pervasive. He self-medicated with alcohol and which lowered his inhibitions. And then, you've got to think about his age. He was 24 years old when this was going on. Still in the process of brain development. Still, what are our 20s known for? We're still known for recklessness, impulsivity, limited judgment.
We talk about extremism being a drug.
Actually, the same way, what drug does to your brain and your body, extremism does the same thing.
The idea of wanting to do something about it and be proactive and problem solve and protect his family, protect his loved ones and the people around him was necessary. So of course, that's very intoxicating.
Extremism, it's almost like an energy that helped them be strong, rather than sink into powerlessness and feel weak.
I think people saw that he was vulnerable. And he was vulnerable and gullible to some extent, because Ty always wanted to help that person.
He was just
naive,
friendly,
too trusting.
He was just
wants to think everybody's good and the whole world is not good.
My love for helping people, whether they need it or not, or it's right or wrong, kind of trumps like my gut feelings of, maybe I shouldn't do this.
And the group really fed into all of Ty's interests and likes, the hunting, survival, outdoor wilderness stuff. So it played into all of his hobbies and his interests. But I think more than anything, he just could not sit and feel helpless with this pandemic. He really believed that the government was going to create this catastrophic effect. We were going to have an economic crash, martial law, and with that, he just felt like he needed to do something. And from there, he just went down a rabbit hole.
Instead of laying me off because we weren't flying or doing any work, my company decided to get the smart idea to put me on paid standby, which is half my hourly rate.
He went from a very busy work schedule to a lot of free time.
I was making a couple $100 less than what I would have been getting in unemployment. So I was hurting real bad for money, to the point where I barely had enough money just to get to and from work.
And unfortunately, a lot of that free time was spent on social media, which is, I think, where part of what fueled a lot of his anxieties, because, what we were reading about in the media was so overwhelming.
I work in the medical field. We were the ones taking care of everything. And he saw that. He saw how tired I was when I came home. He always asked me, "Dad, did you have a bad day?" And I think for that, he always wanted to protect people, and he couldn't protect me, which he didn't need to protect me. I was just tired. I was out doing my job.
He was protective, and he hated this idea of being helpless. And I think the pandemic created for him the ultimate feeling of helplessness, and he could not tolerate it. And he had to do something to be proactive. And what he did was get involved actively with this group.
Your attempt to control life is just going to leave you frustrated. And so I think a lot of that goes into what happened during COVID. What's happening to the United States is that it's a breeding ground right now for people to become extreme thinkers, but go into extremism.
We have never seen such an increase of calls of family members in distress during the pandemic. And, and also what was astonishing is not only that our call load have tripled during the pandemic, but also we have seen all kind of ideology showing up, from white supremacy to QAnon to Islamists to environmental terrorism. It's had been astonishing, including very well-established social justice groups that were being groomed into extremism. So this is to tell that, that the COVID pandemic have triggered so many of the most vulnerable people in a way that we have never expected. Parents for Peace is a nonprofit that was founded by family and friends who have been impacted by extremism. It was also founded by former supremacists, all kinds of former supremacists, and also survivor of violent extremism.
A lot of our families and clinicians and people who work for us have been affected by extremism and hate. You know, I lost 7 people in my life due to a white supremacist attacking a Sikh temple. One of those people were my father. So I would never ever want to put anybody in society in danger. We are always weighing those consequences of how do we put a person out into society that's not going to be dangerous for society. And so when we tell you this, it's not from just understanding extremism. It's real world. It's real life.
We have other former extremists on our team who have shown redemption by spending the rest of their life basically working against extremism. And I'm an example of that. I also had some very wrong beliefs. Thankfully, I didn't move to violence or was prosecuted, but I knew that I had done wrong, and I knew that I needed to make right. I've spent the rest of my life countering extremism, countering terrorism. I've been working very extensively with the U.S. government, different branches of the U.S. government, primarily with the U.S. military, the U.S. State Department, and others, working on this issue of radicalization, extremism, counter-extremism, counter-terrorism.
The Parents for Peace website, which features a photo of a former white supremacist.
I saw him and I thought, wow, if only I could just get him in the same room with my husband, this is what might be able to reach him better,
That person is Chris Buckley. He says he joined the KKK in 2013 after he left the Army following a bad Humvee crash and got addicted to painkillers, then crystal meth.
It's a dream come true every day, to be able to give back to an organization that literally saved my life.
He knows it's a complicated process that can take many months and relies on trust. That's partly why Parents for Peace prizes its nonpartisan status, hesitant to even take government grant money. New research shows stigmatizing extremists or punishing them can be counterproductive, according to the RAND Corporation, where experts interviewed 24 formers, as they're called.
My takeaway from the study is that there's hope. We heard a lot of amazing stories of people that were really in the thick of hate groups. And, most of the people we talked to came out of it.
At Parents for Peace, we are a strong believer of accountability and responsibility because we think that this is a respectful thing to do.
I feel really sorry for everything.
I think he realizes and he went back and he's like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
I don't think we should execute politicians for treason or, barge into a Capitol building and take it over. I don't think any of that's right.
What he didn't think about is the impact this would have on his family and his relationship with his family, because these people really are so important to him. They're such a close-knit, loving family. And it's sad because, one of the last things he said to me was, I didn't think about my family or the impact it would have on them, but it's all I think about now.
I think that my actions took a bigger toll on my family than they took on myself, just with everything they have to deal with on the outside.
When you have that baby and you hold them, you promise forever to protect them. And I can't right now.
Even right now, as I sit in jail, I think she just feels like she can, put the blanket around me and protect me. So she's probably one of the most loving moms out there. So I got that going for me.
Taking into consideration my experiences that I've had as an undercover, working, very closely in intelligence and military and policing context, we found Ty Garbin to be really one of the best candidates for de-radicalization that we've interviewed. He was extremely honest and forthright. We came to understand his history very clearly. The fact that he has taken responsibility for his actions and wants to do right.
He knows he made a mistake. He's righting that wrong. He's doing what he knows is right, and he said that. I know this is the right thing to do.
He wanted his subsequent actions to reflect his true values.
I'm guilty, and I recognize that, And then what I wanted to do was kind of right my wrong, you know, turn a horrible decision into me providing assistance to kind of correct the whole situation, which is what ended up leading me to, you know, cooperating.
And we're lucky here to see that Ty Garbin, for instance, is owning what he did, you know, so that's good because not everybody is in this situation. Many people are still in denial or fight about or try to rationalize what they did.
I'd apologize to is just the entire government of the state of Michigan. And I feel like, you know, at a time with COVID-19 and having to worry about that situation, that this turmoil being mixed into it didn't help the situation a single bit. So
as a country, we're gonna have to really be serious about you know, helping people like the Ty Garbin in the country, because as we speak today, there are many of them out there. And the thing is, what do we do about that? Are we ready to take a public health approach so we can act as early as possible?
This is somebody that we don't just see as a client, but we really hope to see him work with us, countering extremism, countering terrorism, working with the authorities, working with NGOs, working with community groups. And Ty really does show himself to be really an ideal candidate. He's a young man who, you know, can speak to other young people about the mistakes that he made, how to avoid the mistakes, and what specifically, you know, he did wrong, and how to fix them.
Ty being accountable and being of service as we go forward is invaluable to the United States.
And so we have resolved to continue to stay with Ty, and we really and respectfully submit to the court that we be given this opportunity so that we continue on a focused educational curriculum for him.
We need to create a culture of formers to show the world. One thing is to show the world that people can change.
I'm mad at him, but I love him, and I just want my son.
You could trust him. You give him his life back. I really do. I believe that.
I'm not going to be a nuisance to society when I get out of prison. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life bouncing in and out of my prison system. That I'm going to take my punishment from this, learn my lesson, and, you know, build a new life and be a productive member of society again.